Of Tuesday, February 6, 2024 to order. Note this meeting is being televised, streamed, or recorded by Bourne TV. If anyone in the audience is recording or videotaping, they need to acknowledge such at this time. Use of flash photography during select board meetings is prohibited. If anyone from the public wishes to access the meeting, they can do so by calling the following conference line, 1-929-205-6099. The Zoom meeting ID is 869-5775-5505. The password is uppercase, Bourne, B-O-U-R-N-E. The Zoom chat will not be monitored. Participants who wish to speak must raise the hand icon until the chair asks them to unmute. All items within the meeting agenda are subject to deliberation and votes. Meeting is called to order in open session. First is a moment of silence to recognize our troops and public safety personnel, including Earl Baldwin, our former police chief and selectman, who passed away on January 26th. And salute to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Reading of the vision and the mission statements. Who's up?
I'll take it.
Peter?
Vision. Bourne is a proud community that embraces change while respecting the rich heritage of the town and its villages. It is a municipality based on strong fiscal government with a durable economy that recognizes the rights of all citizens, respects the environment, especially the coastal areas of the community and the amenities that it affords. Bourne embraces excellent education and offers to citizens a healthy, active lifestyle.
Want to do the mission too? Or?
Sure. Mission. Bourne will maximize opportunities for social and economic development while retaining attractive, sustainable, and secure coastline and environment for the enjoyment of residents and visitors. Through responsible and professional leadership and in partnership with others, Bourne will strive to improve the quality of life for all residents living and working in a larger community.
Thank you. Anyone here for public comment? Anyone on Zoom for public comment? Oh, there's no public comment this evening. Next item is discussion and possible vote to authorize the chair to sign a letter received from SciTech RE poll attachments. Mr. Dwyer.
Hi, good evening, everyone. This is a letter of comment for something called a further notice of proposed rulemaking, FNPRM. I don't know what that's, I think, the right alphabet soup for it.
You get it.
And it's in a long series of rulemakings from the Federal Communication Commission to make things easier to attach to polls that private entities own or multiple entities own. There were a whole bunch of these that were issued, released for comment, finalized before you approved the beginning of SciTech and its activities last September. So the horse was out of the barn for those. This is another one, the third further notice of these things that's come along. And from reading it, it became immediately obvious that this was aimed at large entities, Westchester County, New York, as opposed to the town of Bourne or rural towns. And it missed a number of items. They didn't focus at all. So as you could read through all of the comments we made a lot of small town specific comments and a lot of Bourne specific comments about the presence of Joint Base Cape Cod partially within the town, the presence of the Great Divide, otherwise known as the Cape Cod Canal, running through us. And I think we're about one of the only municipalities that has that particular problem. And the rulemaking did not have any flexibility for that. So the idea is this is the letter of comment. It's due by Friday. We attached an executive summary and some other verbiage from FCC at the back of it if you had the patience to read through it. And at the bottom, they said, okay, here's where the further notice comes in. So I'm open to any questions you might have on that.
Okay. Any questions from the board, comments?
No, it's well-written. Thank you.
Wasn't me. Stand on the shoulders of much better writers than me, I must say.
Yeah, I think one of the important, looking further down the road in trying to bring better broadband to our communities and the opportunities for even competition or satisfying, the needs of the community. It's an important public comment letter, not as in-depth as the MBI, but still equally important when you put all the pieces together and some of the goals that, the CTEC has with respects to broadband in our community.
Okay. I think this is, I think it's a good letter, and I think it's good that we write it and make a comment.
Motion that we approve the letter to form and instruct the chairman to sign on behalf, or the town administrator to sign on behalf of the board.
Second?
Okay, I think it should be the signature, just a note, should be sincerely Bourne Select Board.
Yes.
Marriage Administrative
Yep.
Chair, so it's clear that it's from the Select Board of the town of Bourne, yep,
We'll put it in your standard letter.
okay. Any other discussion? Okay, we just need a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous, so thank you very much. We'll get it off before Friday.
And I will check the details of the rules. There might be a place to fax it if people still use faxes, or to email a PDF. Anything that's going certified into the Washington area is taking 2 weeks.
Yeah, so we'll find a quicker way to send it. If you send the information to Kathleen and Marlene and
We'll get
Liz,
that
and
to
then
you in the
copy
morning.
me,
Yep.
then
Okay.
we'll make sure we get it
Thank you.
in a way that they make sure we meet the deadline. Awesome, thanks for coming. And thanks for the work. You guys are like,
Killing it.
yeah, you're doing a lot of stuff that we wouldn't have been able to do anything about because we just don't have the bandwidth, so it's really, great
Pun
volunteer
intended.
committee, and so thank everyone on behalf of the Board of Selectmen for their great work. Okay, well, that was quick. Next is, policy workshop. And the first one is third reading of the special events policy. And, we did get this morning, like, the red line copy of, so what the, town, what had been changed, which was helpful, because it would have taken me hours to, like, figure out, like, what was this? So, are the yellow things some other things that, so there were red things that were eliminated things, and then, you
That's
wanna
correct.
go through and explain what's been changed, so
Yeah,
we can?
so the yellow was all basically touched areas. Let's go on the first page under purpose and intended use, actually on page 3. Those are all new, that's all new content from our legal department, putting those in for clarification as to the intended use, as well as making sure that there's basically a disclaimer in the purpose of it.
Okay,
Okay. Flipping to page 5, under category of events, we realized that there wasn't a definition of beach cleanup. As simple as it sounds, some people don't really know, and we should be clear as to what exactly is a quote-unquote beach cleanup, and who qualifies actually for a beach cleanup. Is it an individual who just goes and collects trash, or is it an actually organized event? So we just needed to make sure that
Okay.
staff is clear on that. And the same thing with car washes, volunteers, not specifically for fundraising or other things like that. Flipping to page 11, under indemnification, actually, believe it or not, the attorney said that we use too much language. So, and that actually was ripped off by the attorneys from Barnstable. So, so that's actually nice that our attorneys are saying to pare it down a little
Okay.
to one sentence. Um, Bless you.
Thank you.
Flipping to page 14, under enhancement requirements, Brian wanted to just make sure that it was stipulated that it's not going to supersede any other laws or regulations that are involved with either entertainment or alcohol or any other things that might be of conflict
Okay.
as laws change. And we are not moving as fast as the state is for some reason. Okay, page 17, under event requirements, this had a little bit more, the First Amendment protected events had a little bit more of a change, just to make sure that Brian was, felt comfortable with specifically, first of all, the first letter A is talking about how staff actually should be consulting with town council just to verify what steps we're taking is not going to impede on anyone's First Amendment rights. Okay. And then letter E is the same thing on actual content. It's diving a little deeper into it, so it's elaborating more on than what we had. He struck out letter I, which is breaking news associated First Amendments, and then shifted down, added J and K to that.
Which will be I and J.
Right, so
Yeah.
it's shifting now, exactly, which will be now the I
Yeah.
and J, exactly. Okay. So the next would be filming, and it's the same thing. We had a discussion over First Amendment filming. So we wanted to make sure that that was included in there, that it is a protected activity. And so staff, as well as anyone reading this, any type of audience would know that that is something that is allowed, and that we need to, that any staff who has questions should contact the administration office for clarification on filming on town property, whether it be inside or outside.
Can you explain the student, that he deleted the student production filming for maybe exempt? He deleted that?
He did delete that, because he didn't feel like, and I agreed, I was okay, I compromised on that one, only because I thought students of college or a level usually are the ones who are filming, but if there is any discrepancy as far as middle school or even younger who were filming, would we be required to make them have a permit for it? And that's what that states. So we could clarify that in going into more college students, or student activities like their own television shows, do they need a permit to film on town property? So we can clarify that a little bit more in the second version that comes before you later in the future months, but as of right now, I didn't feel that it was something that we needed to dive deeper into.
Well, it's not the same thing as like a filming of a major
Major,
production
yeah,
filming
yeah.
where there's, best boys and
Commercial or
gaffers
professional.
and rigging electricians and all kinds of stuff going on, or maybe stunts or something. I mean, student filming's usually someone with a camera and walking around. Okay,
Yes, that's correct.
that's kind
yes.
of
But
almost
sometimes-
comes into First Amendment.
Right, but sometimes there are some more elaborate student productions, such as
Yeah.
NYU students that actually come to the Cape to do something, or Emerson College would actually come to film on the Cape, and this is the start of the Cape, so it's easier for Boston students to come down here and film, rather than go all the way to Provincetown or some other location. So, but again, we'll get to that point when, if we have any issues, we'll,
Okay, that sounds good.
okay?
Thank you.
Yes. And then flipping, I think that's it, except for at the very end on page 31, the fees associated with, in the appendix, those are coming in the next round or the next phase of this policy and procedures. As you know, this is just a running tab of categories of fees that we're gonna have to take a look at and evaluate. And one of the things that Brian had, that brought to my attention was we need to discuss when violations occur. and if there are any fees associated with that based on reoccurring violations, first offenses, second offenses, yeah, all of that. So I just put that in as a placeholder.
Okay,
Okay.
awesome,
And that's it.
okay. Any comments or questions from the board members?
It's pretty self-explanatory, a lot of language.
Very thorough.
Yeah, very thorough.
I think it's establishes a good framework, and it's an accomplishment under a year. Just barely. I think we started this, it was in April or February. I think it was April, maybe.
It's been a while.
We had a big
Oh, maybe
policy
if
thing
you
in
came on
February, but
before
think it
I
was
did, but-
April. Yeah,
But I think it
Yeah.
was, yeah.
yeah, so it was good, well done, thank you very much. Okay, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. What,
Approve of
yeah.
the draft first reading.
Okay, motion to approve the draft as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Now the fees. But we, in our policy subcommittee meeting, Maria did say that it's very helpful to them in the town administrator's office to have everything really laid out. So when people call with questions, it's right there, or they can give it, the answer to them right away, so.
It's in there.
Yeah, so it's really good, so.
Actually, Maria's already used the draft as sending it to someone, and the customer basically, they thought it was very thorough and it was easy to understand and guide them appropriately. So we already had a test run, and we got some good positive feedback on it.
Awesome.
Yep.
Great. So that's effective as of like now, right? There's no delay in this. We're done. Okey dokey. All right, awesome. Okay, next is policy and process for issuing licenses that are limited in number. And I know some of you don't like read your email like all the time, but I did look at this and I did make some revisions and I did send it out to everybody so that I wouldn't have to try to explain it without you being able to have it in writing, so. Where do we want to start? We want to start with the beginning, the middle, the end? You want me to explain what I did?
Sure.
I kind of explained it in the email. I like consistency of language. So, we had a town meeting and we voted zoning bylaws for marijuana, recreational adult use, and registered marijuana dispensaries. So rather than talking about cannabis, which isn't really the language that we've been using, and it's not what's in our bylaw, I wanted to use consistent language. So that was the first thing I did, is say, all right, let's use the marijuana. I don't know if that's technically correct or not, but it's kind of what we've been doing, so that's kind of what I did. Then, the other thing is that the policy referred to develop final regulations or promulgate regulations. And we actually adopt policy and procedures, so I wanted to use that language because that's kind of what we do. The third piece of it was kind of the ending piece where it had said that the moratorium would be in place for an initial term of 1 year, and I really wasn't comfortable with that. I think the intent here is to have the moratorium until the board actually adopts the policies and procedures. And I think if it takes us more than 6 months, we should look at what's taking us so long and come up with a plan for getting it done. So those are my changes. Other than that, it was kind of, just using the format that town council said, but I wasn't really comfortable with the 1 year thing. And I will say, I went to Shore and Harbor last week when they met. They had an agenda item for the aquaculture, and they're gonna have another meeting about that. But Chris Southward did some research, and for the aquaculture license, they're thinking of an application process where they have certain certain things you have to do in order to get an aquaculture permit in Bourne. You have to be a resident, you have to do this, it has to, there's a lot of it. There are apparently 20 acres of aquaculture for 7 license holders. But they wanted, after applicants had passed that initial screening, to have a lottery for the applications. And this is what a lot of towns do for their aquaculture licenses, because if there's a lot of competition, it's really hard to choose, especially if they all meet the regs. So they're gonna work on that and come back to us with a recommendation, and we can then discuss their recommendation at the time. So, any other comments or questions that we wanna do here?
So
I wouldn't
is
wanna
the
do,
intent to have one policy that addresses multiple applicants for limited licensing?
No, we
Okay.
can't. They're different they're different laws, they're different
Right.
frameworks.
Right.
So this, at the end of this, there will be, you'll have 3 policy.
So it's
Books.
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And it might be different, because I don't really think the marijuana or the cannabis license is a lottery. I'm not sure I'm interested in that. I'm more interested in the board evaluation and people making presentations and are making a determination as what's in the best interest. But I think it may be different. That's one of the things that occurred to me, that if they think that if everybody's qualified and they don't want to choose, then, because it used to be first come, first served, so they didn't have to choose. And now, I think the lottery, for that particular license, I think a lottery of qualified applicants is a better than first come, first served. So I think we'll kind of work through it.
Okay.
And I think for the liquor license, because that if we make it, they have the right to appeal. So we'd have to go through that public hearing process. But how we determine, and having that open application period, then having us be able to meet all of the applicants and make the decision on who the best applicant is, and then be able to go and defend that at ABCC is a different process. So I think there will be different,
Well, I think there's a difference of impact, if I may.
Yes.
I think there's a difference of impact. You know, they all impact the community, but the ways that they impact the community are different. The aquaculture licensing affects one part of the community.
Right.
It's a very limited and specific, whereas you get into the other licenses, it's very overly impactful in many different ways to the community, rather than just one particular place. So I think that's the difference, probably. That might be the biggest difference maker.
Right.
As far as having a lottery and having a judgmental decision.
right. So, any other comments, Peter?
Excuse me. Yeah, I was very concerned with the 1-year limitation, it is for, to the extension. I still think 6 months is too long. I think,
Well, I didn't make it a 6-month thing. I said, if we haven't done, what I said was the moratorium shall be placed for each type of license until the board has adopted policy and procedures and voted to lift the temporary moratorium for a type of license. So if we figure out one, we can lift that moratorium and move on to the next one, or
Right,
all of them.
right.
If after 6 months has elapsed, the board has not adopted, oh, that shouldn't say final regulations, it should say final policies and procedures. Final policies and procedures for one or more of these types of licenses, the board shall review this moratorium and make a plan for the timely adoption of these policies and procedures.
I apologize for looking on my phone because I'm not connected to the email on here,
Okay.
but it's working on my phone for some reason. So, so for those who at home who see me doing this, I don't know. I think if after 3 months, if anything, I don't want 6 months. I don't want a year, because at least with a shorter time frame, it gives, it forces you to keep on doing the work to get there. Because I'm afraid if we leave 6 months in, all of a sudden things change, priorities change, and all of a sudden, it's not going to get done in that time. And so I would feel comfortable if after 3 months.
I don't know.
I don't even know where this came out of nowhere, actually. I didn't even expect it. And I don't know what's the sense if it's gonna be a short period of time. And we've got 3 separate licenses that you said are 3 different things, but we're gonna include them in one moratorium. I just don't understand the need. We've created a committee to already address the issues and to plan for the cannabis licenses. I thought we were tasked with that. I've already started doing
Yes,
some work on
yes.
that. So I just don't understand what's the sense. And, you know, if we're gonna put it on for the shellfish, I understand that they're working through that, but I mean, there's already a moratorium on that, except for the new license that's available now. But putting a moratorium on, is it gonna delay, an actual individual who's, waiting to maybe take that license? I know my son's a commercial fisherman, and, something like that could have a real detrimental effect on his annual profit if he couldn't, get the license. So are we preventing someone or stalling to get someone who might need that license? I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure, to be
So we
honest.
talked about this, I think it was the meeting that you might not have been here. I think it was the meeting you had surgery. We had a preliminary discussion about this and then referred it back to town council. And town council's the one that used that word about the temporary moratorium. That came from town council, looking at what we had, trying to do. So we were in a situation with Market Basket where a license came up, and we didn't have we didn't have anything in place to stop them from applying.
Sure.
In terms of the aquaculture license, the Board of Selectmen is actually the board that voted the moratorium in October, I think, of
No, I know.
2016.
I understand all that.
So,
It really, it allows us the opportunity to put a moratorium on a license where we don't yet have policy.
right,
And that's the key. The key is to have policy to ensure an equitable process, a fair process.
So we're
And
working on it.
and it's a temporary moratorium. It's very temporary, just to make sure that we have everything in place that we feel we need to have in place. It's a safety net, if you will, to make sure that we're prepared for certain licenses that may come to fruition before we might be prepared. I think that's a good way to put it.
Well, I also think that some of these will be easier than others, and with the cannabis issue, the HCA, the host community agreement, most likely will probably end up using what's boilerplate for the Cannabis Control Commission. So that's an easy lift. Now you're looking at what our regulations are and how we're going to rate our scale and everything else. And we've been looking at other communities, and I just don't want to make things sound like we're taking forever to do it when it's not as, it's not that heavy a lift, because a lot of the other communities have already done it.
I think that, I'm actually fine with the 3 months.
Yeah, I'm okay
Because I
with
think the 3 months is actually kind of a good benchmark. I think that the committee that's working on this should be reporting regularly back to the board. But, you start getting into March, and then April, March is like getting budget ready for, yeah.
If I could, it's February 6th.
right,
3 months is exactly town meeting.
right, March.
So if this is your taking on writing and drafting these rules and regulations and policies, absolutely.
But don't forget that 3 months is a benchmark to say, hey,
What's
what
the
are we
plan?
doing with this?
Yeah.
How do we move it forward? It's not saying,
But
the
they're
way
gonna-
it's written
Right,
currently with the 6 months in it is still not saying we have to have it done in 6 months.
No.
It's saying that if we reach that 6-month mark, we've got to start moving things along. And we've got to find a way to move things along. So the 3 month is fine. I have no issue with the 3 months, because it still only says, hey, why are we not done with this yet? Why aren't we moving forward? What's our plan? So I'm okay with the 3 months. I don't think most of these will take that long. I don't know that they will. Some of them they may take, they're going to be different. There are different clauses, different factors. But it is a mark, it's a benchmark that says, what are we doing?
we're working on this.
How do we-
and we're
how
gonna
do we
look
move
at-
it forward?
And if we're
And-
not done doing it in 3 months, we're gonna talk about it again.
Right. So,
I thought we were already working on it, that's what I'm saying.
So, I mean.
Well, I
the
think it's
editor-
motivation too,
Yeah.
to get the job done, right?
is.
Because
It
we don't
is.
wanna, we don't wanna keep
it's
this
a benchmark
moratorium.
that says,
We don't-
hey, let's pick up our feet and get our boots
Yeah.
moving.
And as part of the 3 months, I would like to see monthly discussions on the agenda just for an update, so we know through the process, how you're moving along, And so I would like to see it on the agenda every month, just to update.
That's fine.
If we're in that process, I'm sure that that's probably not
Yes.
an issue to have that as a case, a monthly update.
Well, you'll get it quicker than that, because we'll be meeting
The
couple of
13th, you're
times
meeting the
into-
13th or
Right.
something,
Yeah.
so we'll
We're
get
meeting
it, we'll get it.
And
subsequent weeks,
a
back to
monthly-
back, so.
A monthly update for each, not monthly.
Well, at least for the marijuana. I mean, we're not actually,
Do you
there's
want,
no one
is
working
your
on that.
expectation that we work on these simultaneously?
Well, the aquaculture one looks like it's already a work in progress, right?
And it's doing its own
And
process.
do they have the understanding that, I mean, are they aware of the moratorium and?
Yeah, yes,
the urgency,
yes,
or not
yeah.
urgency, but the need to like put it on the radar
They're-
and.
But they only meet
make
once a
some
month. They
decisions.
really only meet once a
Oh,
month.
okay.
So they're gonna meet about it on the next meeting.
Right.
And then I went to the meeting to make sure that we had a discussion with them. They kind of have taken it over. What they have now is there's a pretty good policy in place, but it's a first come, first served policy.
Right.
And everybody kind of agreed that we're not comfortable with that, where, that word of mouth thing where someone hears about it, someone tells somebody, and not everybody gets to know, is, I think, not an equitable process. So,
Especially when
and-
you have multiple qualified people.
Right. And we already sort of did this with marijuana and said we weren't gonna do it until certain conditions were done. But I think that because there's alcohol and license, and the alcohol license and the alcohol license, I did put in new, if I didn't write it in, I meant to put new license. Where the thing is, for under new licenses, so it says one, recreational adult use marijuana and registered marijuana license dispensary licenses, 2, aquaculture licenses, and 3, new licenses for the sale of alcoholic beverages on premises, because they're only the new ones. And, I mean, we're not having another census for a long time, and unless there's some special license that gets voted at a town meeting, I don't think it's gonna be an issue right away.
Right.
So personally, the marijuana license is the primary one that we should be working on. And then the aquaculture, and then the alcohol, but I think they'll build on each other.
Yeah, well, that's why
In
I'm
terms
asking,
of-
because I
yeah.
think if we're setting precedent with how we're evaluating multiple applicants for limited licenses, then, a lot of that work is gonna carry over, I think, to the
Right.
alcohol license. And it sounds like, aquaculture, they probably already have an idea of what.
Yeah, there's a pretty comprehensive policy
Right.
about what the requirements are, so, and I think we just have to figure
Just
out,
have
like,
to categorize it.
who does the decision-making? Who evaluates whether is it the Department of Natural Resources that evaluates it? Is it the
And then
Shore
makes
and
a
Harbor
recommendation.
Committee? Do they make a recommendation to us, and then there's a lottery, so.
Some towns have priority populations for shellfish and
Yeah.
aquaculture license, like Native American people.
And that's another thing to
Right,
consider.
Just so you know, you know.
yeah, exactly, and that's a conversation that should be had, right?
Right, especially towns that have a tribe right amongst
Right,
it,
Right.
like Mashpee and other towns.
yeah.
Anyhow,
So, pleasure of the board. Do you want to use the revised one where we make the changes for new licenses for the sale of alcoholic beverages? If after 3 months has elapsed, the board has not adopted final policies and procedures for one of these types of license, the board shall review this moratorium and make a plan for timely adoption.
I like the revision, and I'm good with the 3 months. Again, it's a marker.
Okay.
It says, get things going, what are we doing? It's not has to be done. And, we want to do this in a timely manner, but we want to have, fair and
Right,
equity
and we're
coverage.
expecting that there'll be monthly.
And please have monthly
We're expecting
updates.
there'll be monthly updates.
There's a certain
Even more
expectation
than
for
that.
that. I'm okay with all of that. I'd like to use the new revisions.
Okay,
So moved
With edits?
with the edits.
yeah. as amended,
Yeah,
revised as amended.
I'll make that motion.
Second it?
Is there any other discussion? Anybody from the audience? Steve?
Good evening, Steve Stroney, Monument Beach, thank you. I just want to say, when you started the discussion, Madam Chair, you made reference to an email and then explained some of the contents of that email to the rest of the board.
Yeah.
But that's very difficult to follow. I didn't really understand for the first 5 or 10 minutes what you were talking about. And if you're watching at home, I can guarantee you, you have no idea what you guys
Okay.
talked about for the
You
first.
know what? I'll read the policy as we're voting it. I will read it aloud so that
Okay.
people can understand exactly what we're voting.
Okay.
Okay,
Good.
and what I did was, I used the format of what was in the packet and just tried to explain what the different changes were, but I'll read the whole thing, so.
Okay, so that was
Yeah.
just my first point, and just because I follow this as carefully and closely as I can, and I was lost there, so I'm assuming maybe some other folks were lost as well. But I want to speak, probably not surprisingly, to the cannabis end of things. You have the ad hoc committee, and I think the first scheduled meeting is for February 13th. And in my mind, you know, if that committee does its job, and I think they will, I think you're looking at probably 2 meetings where they're able to craft a policy to bring back to the whole Board of Selectmen. And, you know, you folks would do your thing from there, maybe tweak it. You have to do several readings and whatnot, you know, the logistical process of that all. But I just want to emphasize to the board a couple of the things I'm thinking, and I'm hearing just in the general public, is that it's been 3 months since the ban was repealed, and it appears we haven't really made any progress. And I know part of that is we were waiting on the state for some guidance, and we have that now. So now there's really nothing holding us back at this point. The other thing is, I think there's some dire financial times coming, and 3 fully operational dispensaries in town have the potential to bring about $30,000 a week into the town, and that is very substantial money. And more money indirectly through the additional taxes you pay just beyond the 3% that comes to the town of Bourne. Also, these dispensaries have about 20 employees. And what I've heard over the last several months is that people who like cannabis, they're passionate about it. And people have come up to me and said, hey, when these stores open, you know, I'd love to work in them and everything. And I said, well, it's a little bit premature to talk about that. But the point that's not premature to talk about is that these stores employ about 20, 25 people, good paying jobs, around $20 an hour with benefits. That's 60 to 70 jobs that will be filled by mostly residents of Bourne. And these are good jobs, jobs with management potential and growth, hours that work for moms while the kids are in school and whatnot. So in my mind, at least, there ought to be a priority on getting this done. And when it gets grouped with all these other things, and you say, well, we'll say we'll get it done in 3 months, and if we don't get it done in 3 months, as I read the motion, it said we may extend it again. That's what it said right at the bottom, that if it's not done in 3 months, we may extend it again. So that doesn't fill the average person with a lot of confidence that this is a priority. But I believe it is, and I think you guys are doing a good job. I think you're going about it the right way. I think the ad hoc committee is going to accomplish a lot in the next 2 meetings. As Jared indicated, you know, this is you know, we're still going to work on it, and we're going to hopefully get it done before that. But this is something that just makes us aware that, you know, a deadline is there. So I don't disagree with what you're doing, but I just want to impress upon the board that I think this should be a priority for a number of reasons. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. I do want to say, though, we have done a lot of work on this. We haven't done nothing, because the board's had several meetings where we talked about how we wanted to do it, that we wanted to set the competitive process, that we set up the ad hoc committee. So it may seem like we're not doing anything, but we're actually,
In public.
we're actually
doing
working
it.
pretty fast for for like what usually happens.
Well-
And special events started last April, and so we're pushing the envelope
Well,
here,
just,
and we're working on it.
Well, just to that point, Madam Chair, if I suggested, or the inference was that you're not doing anything, then I apologize for that, because that's not what my intent was.
Okay.
And if you are doing things behind the scenes, we don't know about that. So
So
that.
we've had several meetings, that's the problem.
I've been at
You know,
every
we
one of-
only meet so
Yeah,
many
but
times.
I've been at every one of them, so I'm aware of the progress, and like I said, we're making progress, there's no question about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So I'm going to read the policy now as it's, because there are a number of changes. So it says, under the Town of Bourne Home Rule Charter and general bylaws and the general laws of the Commonwealth, the Select Board serves as the town's licensing authority for certain types of licenses, including the sales of alcoholic beverages off premises, sales of marijuana for recreational adult use, registered marijuana dispensaries, and permits to operate aquaculture farms. Such licenses may vary in the rights and privileges conferred upon a license holder, may be of limited number, and those licenses issuance may require the Select Board to consider multiple applicants to evaluate relevant factors for the issuance or non-issuance of a license. To discharge those duties effectively and equitably, the Select Board will engage in a process to study and develop policies and procedures that will apply to its review and evaluation of applications for certain types of licenses. Until such time as that process is complete and the board has adopted final policies and procedures, the board is enacting a temporary moratorium on the issuance of 1, recreational adult use marijuana and registered marijuana dispensary licenses, 2, aquaculture licenses, and 3, new licenses for the sale of alcoholic beverages off premise. And there's a footnote explaining that you can still transfer alcoholic beverages licenses. The moratorium shall be in place for each type of license until the board has adopted policy and procedures and voted to lift the temporary moratorium for a type of license. If, after 3 months has elapsed, the board has not adopted final policies and procedures for one or more of these types of licenses, the board shall review this moratorium and make a plan for the timely adoption of these policies and procedures. And so the intent is, if we haven't made our final progress in 3 months, we're gonna make sure that we have a definite plan for getting it done as soon as possible. So,
That language is much better.
okay, thank you. Okay, any other comments?
And it would be effective the date of
The approval,
approval.
which would be today.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion by Peter and a second by Jared. And is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? It's unanimous. Thank you. Moving right along. Next item is introduction of financial policy revisions. I will turn this over to the town administrator and her staff.
Thank you. So as you know, this was one of the areas that we wanted to prioritize. And I did obtain a grant from the Collins Center to help us through this process. The board appointed a subcommittee involving the finance committee, the school committee, 2 of you, me, the finance director, and the school superintendent. And we met a number of times, 5 or 6 maybe, with the consultants to review the existing policies and expand, in some cases, expand on them and revise them, and in other cases, create new policies for certain aspects. And the only policy that we didn't change was the ISWIM policy, but we do recommend that be incorporated into your new financial policy book. So I'm happy to talk about any of the specifics, and I'd also like to get your thoughts on how you want to go about adopting these with the three groups, so the select board, the finance committee, and the school committee, because they all have a role to play.
School committee and the Upper Cape Tech School Committee as well.
Just the Bourne Public Schools. That-
Financial policy, yes.
You know, but
They don't, yeah, they don't get
They're not
impacted by that.
included in our financial policy.
well, they give us their number and then we have to figure out how to pay for it, so we don't really have any. But still,
I think it's really, that's an interesting, we didn't really include, last time it was signed by the finance director, the town accountant, the select board, and the chair of the finance committee. We didn't even have, the school committee didn't sign off on it. Some towns do have that sign off by that committee. The decisions that are in the policy about use of free cash, use of stabilization, what our general fund, what our fund balances are gonna be, those aren't really things that are in the purview of either the Upper Cape or the Bourne School Committee. We bring them in the picture so they understand the policies that we're working under, because we're really the ones that are developing and presenting the budget. It's the select board budget that goes to town meeting, and it's a select board budget that needs to meet all these policies.
Right, I think just for the education awareness alone in decision-making and how it impacts all the departments, you know, we are one budget, everybody's a piece of that budget, and understanding the financial policies that we're bound to, I think is important to have, you know, school committees involved in that process. Not necessarily in the decision-making, but I think it's important for them to have a really thorough understanding of these policies. Because their decisions do impact the budget.
I understand, but the reason I brought up Upper Cape Tech is as their enrollment increases and if they're taking more Bourne students, now that cost is borne on us here to pay for the additional students, and that may, that may affect the domino effect all the way down the line, with the rest of the budget, but potentially, we're not gonna, and so I just feel that they should be part of the part of the discussion, more than just coming every March and just going through their presentation, because they are part of the community and they shouldn't be.
Well, that's, I think you're talking budget process.
Yeah.
More,
Yeah.
and we did ask them to come in
Yeah,
November
absolutely.
to talk about, and I think that was a good meeting, because I think it helped everyone, both school committees and the select board and the finance committee, sort of understand the constraints that we're under in terms of budget. And one of the things that came out in the governor's, in the cherry sheet, is that we're down. It's like a $200,000 deficit from last year compared to what we got as net state aid. I mean,
Right.
they can talk all they want to about like your increases in, the state aid that they're granting, but when the assessments increase more and you end up with a net loss, then that's, we try to budget conservatively, level fund it, and now we're level funding it and finding that we have a deficit to make up in terms of the way we've planned our budget. I think finding ways to keep them involved, to make them aware of the fact that we've established these is probably a good idea. I think the question is, do we want everyone to sign it, or who do we want to sign this policy? Who do we want to approve it as this is the policy of the town?
Well, if it's a town policy, it falls directly under the select board, for sure.
Yeah, so the select board definitely has to sign it, definitely has to adopt
Finance
it.
director.
I think,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the
and
finance
FinCom's our
director, I
oversight.
think,
FinCom's our oversight. So,
yeah, oh, and the town administrator signed it.
Obviously, the town
Yeah.
administrator should be on that.
And that is like everyone agreeing that these are the rules, this is the policy that these are the policies that we should be having and working from. So those people, we did, the last time we did this, which was 2015, I think.
Yeah.
Or maybe we did a revision of it for OPEB a couple of years after that, like maybe 2017 or something. We did have a meeting with the finance committee, and the finance committee, sort of voted their agreement with the policy, that they were, they were, and then the finance committee chair signed on behalf of the finance committee that the finance committee was in agreement with the policy.
Maybe it's part of, I know it's in our packet, but, maybe we should have it up online if it's not already, just for a public comment period, so people know that this is a working document, and what do you think of this? And if they email us back saying that we may not get any answers back, but I can remember.
Is this in the public packet, this policy?
It is,
Yeah.
it is.
It's in the public packet,
It's in
yeah.
the packet, but on the website itself, because people may not, if you don't.
Well,
unless-
if we need a watermark for
Yeah, well,
draft,
that's,
if we're gonna put it out someplace. So, I think it might be, we could have a meeting with the finance committee when we go through it. I would like to, have, because we've done this in the past when we did this policy, we kind of looked at our current, like our proposed budget and say, or where we are with free cash and where we are with stabilization. And this policy establishes, it establishes a capital budget as part of the budget that they want us to work into into the operating budget. And currently, we've made a lot of changes in capital, where we used to borrow for everything and hardly use any free cash. And so our debt service was high. And we've made some changes where we've stopped using free cash for the operating budget. We've paid more for capital with free cash rather than using borrowing. So we have sort of some parameters for borrowing. But in addition to that, they want us to be buying more capital really in the operating, as part of the general fund operating budget. And that, I think we should have an understanding as to whether that's really, we're comfortable moving in that direction. It's gonna put it's gonna put pressure on the operating budget, which is already pressured. And if we're not comfortable with making that, we shouldn't make it policy. We've said in the policy that it's gonna take time to accomplish that, but unless we're getting 30,000 a week from marijuana, that's gonna give us a whole lot of money that we haven't been counting on, that's gonna pay for that, I think that's gonna be a difficult bar. And unless we do it in a way where, as our debt service goes down, like
To offset it.
so right now, I don't know what let's say we've got 5% of our general fund operating budget as debt service. And suppose next year it goes down to 4%, then you can take 1% and make that for capital. So you're making it you're maintaining that over time you would do it that way, but I need to have it laid out, like some of these things that are in here, what does this actually mean? Like, It's all on paper, and then it's all sounds pretty good, but what does it actually mean? And
Yeah, I think, if I may.
Yes,
I think you're
please.
right. I think it's gonna take some time, and it may be a phased approach, and not by definition phased, but maybe simply, like you're saying, maybe as some of the debt service comes off, we put a little bit into the budget directly for capital. I don't think this is gonna happen overnight.
Yeah. Mary Jane, you're referencing the special purpose stabilization fund. Are you like?
no,
Pay as you
no.
go. Pay as you go.
Because there's
in
language in that, the
capital.
capital stabilization fund, the pay-as-you-go projects to
No.
preserve the town's debt capacity for major capital projects.
No.
What is the difference?
Where is
Didn't-
the
so
capital?
how was the middle school? Was that
About
put?
ISWIM, it was in the general fund budget.
It wasn't it?
There was no, they didn't pass a debt exclusion on it.
Right,
No,
and
they
didn't
paid
that
it.
pose a real?
Roman, they tried
stress
having ISWAM
financially?
paying for it.
Yeah, it was, basically, it was about that time that ISWIM came on board, and they basically used the host community fee. They said the host community fee that we earned from ISWIM is gonna be enough to pay for the middle school. And it did. I mean, there were times back when we were in the 2005 override situation, where it was $800,000 that we were paying in the operating budget for the middle school.
Right,
It was tough.
yeah,
But then there was a thing that they did, there was an opportunity to buy it out early.
Yep.
And then, so they ended up buying it out early, and that took that relief off the budget. And that was about the time, it was about that time when we started reducing the ISWIM host community fee for the budget down to the 600,000 and limiting it for that, because we weren't paying for the middle school anymore.
Right. But again, as things change, we phase things from one to the other.
Right.
You know, and I think that's really, and you kind of said it, I think that's the only way we're gonna be able to do it, is to just phase it in slowly.
I don't
And I
think
don't
you
think you can-
can, because sometimes you're gonna have to borrow,
Yep.
Yes.
yeah.
depending on what's on your 5-year
Right.
capital plan.
Right.
Like, you're gonna have to
We-
borrow for
we
things
can't
like
put that
fire
pat-
stations.
We can't put that
Can't put it all
on
in
an operating
in the
budget.
operating budget
Just
like that.
can't stress an
It's not.
operating budget like that.
You can move some at a little bit at a time here and there wherever it's possible, but that's what I'm saying.
Those one-offs like we are
Yeah,
doing
I think
now.
you're gonna have some phased parts of it. I don't think and it's certainly not gonna happen quickly.
You're not gonna see a major capital project part of your operating budget. It's just, it's,
So what is the threshold then? I
I
mean,
don't
is
think you
it,
can set one.
Well,
I don't.
so my concern is if you're thinking about taking some of the debt that's falling off and committing to do it for capital pay-as-you-go, then you don't have that debt available when you do need to borrow for your next major project. That's,
But you do, if it's, instead of using available funds, free cash, in other words, you're paying for it, because it says, on page 10, pay-as-you-go financing. When a capital asset is paid entirely or partially from current operating budget revenue or available funds in the year that it is acquired. So in that year that it's acquired, say, 200,000 drops off of the debt. You spend 200,000 on current year capital budget in your operating budget, so you maintain your 5% capital. The next year, if you're borrowing and you need to up the borrowing, then you don't, that 200,000 goes out of the pay-as-you-go and into the debt. I mean, it becomes sort of an
and this gives the
exchange.
flexibility to do that, the way this is written.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about it. It's kind of like the same thing, like, we've had discussions over the years as whether the police cars that are purchased as a rotating every year, we're buying police cars. And so we've had a number of times, especially during overrides, where we discuss, should those become part of the operating budget? Because we're buying them every year, so they're
consistent
not.
purchase.
Yeah, so it's a consistent purchase. And my concern is, since Proposition 2.5, what happens if you do that is there'll be that year, and it happened during COVID, where they said, oh, we don't need to buy the police cars this year because, we've got COVID, we don't know what we're doing. We're gonna put off that capital project so that and then you don't do your capital that's on your regular thing because there's stress on the operating budget, and then you create a capital hole. And I get really concerned about that because it's really easy to put off those capital things, in favor of the operating. So it's, go ahead.
I also don't, I would be very reluctant to put something like police cruisers in your operating budget. There's just too much fluctuation to even, they don't cost the same.
From year to year.
Right.
And we can't, and right now, we can't even guess what they're gonna, like,
Well, especially now, because we're trying to go with the efficient ones that meet our criteria.
well,
You
there,
don't know what you're gonna expend.
you don't know what you're gonna pay for a vehicle of any type. And things like that, I mean, they're not expensive enough to borrow for, but they're also not operating. They are capital, they meet the capital definitions. I don't,
Yeah, that was one of the things that changed in this, is we upped the capital definition from 10,000 to 25.
and that is something that will be bringing before you for a town meeting article for May.
For changing the capital bylaw, because that is in the bylaw. We
That's
have
in the
to change-
bylaw.
Yeah, we have to change the bylaw. There's a couple things in the bylaw that we talked about changing.
Yeah, so we will be working on some bylaw changes for capital for May town meeting.
Yeah, so, so some of the definitions of capital, but there's on page 11 of the policy, which if you're in your packet, is page 26. It says, for projects other than those related to enterprise fund programs, grant programs, and the CPA, the target for spending for general fund capital projects, exclusive of those finance outside of Proposition 2.5, that means not including, right? Shall be 7% of the prior fiscal year general fund budget. So they're setting a 7% for capital funding. The source of these funds shall be any combination of projected general fund operating revenue or available funds. The 7% shall be comprised of the following: 2% targeted for building renewal and replacement of existing or acquisition of new equipment on a pay-as-you-go basis. 5% targeted for debt service on debt finance projects. And it says, then it says, this policy recognizes meeting the above capital, maybe take a couple of years to proceed. So, but for me, I'd like to see, what does this mean? Like, if we were looking at this year, I'd like to know, like, what exactly that means. It doesn't, I don't
So it's
really.
the prior
understand.
fiscal year general fund budget,
Right,
the 7%.
yeah, so what is that number? And where are we compared to it now? And where does it come from? You know what I mean? And
Yeah, well, where
Source-
does it come from is a great question.
Good question, where does it
Yeah,
come from?
but okay.
And it doesn't actually, for some reason, I felt that there was, it doesn't really say how much is supposed to come from the general fund. Does it ever on this say?
It just says the source, it's any combination of projected general fund operating revenue or available
Maybe Erica
funds.
knows. Does it say
So
anything
should
in
we-
here that we're gonna have certain percent of the operating fund budget be capital? Is that in the operating budget?
Wait a minute, ask the question again? What did you say?
Does it set?
Where does it say that thing about the operating budget? It's, the thing that's difficult about this policy is sometimes it's here, and then sometimes it's an operating budget, and so you have to kind of almost like memorize it. Go ahead.
So I think you're in the right spot, MJ. If you're on page 12, and then in section 3, we're looking at 2% for the pay-as-you-go items. So with available funds, if you will, and I think the 5% should be targeted for debt service or finance projects, which we're under, and that will take some time. That is not something we'll be able to do overnight. And I was actually on a webinar today hosted by the Department of Revenue. And this is something that they've been talking about, because what we're losing is we're losing investment capacity or in our assets as the debt's falling off. We're not spending that money, or the budget's eating it up.
Yep.
It is a concern.
Yep.
And I'll share the slide deck with you. And it is something that the state is watching. Don't let all your debt fall off. You need to keep that appropriation available for that. But we're not close to the 5%. Don't quote me now, but I think we're probably about half. Maybe, but then we're also using the capital stabilization fund, which brings that number even lower.
Right.
So it needs a lot of work. I think in theory it's a great concept. We're gonna need a plan.
Yeah, how do we get there?
But so one of the things, one of the things about the capital stabilization fund is we've been parking money, excess host community fee, in the capital stabilization fund. So when we started the $600,000 for ISWIM host community fee, the excess host community fee was maybe $175,000. And because we've left the host community fee at $600,000, while the price per ton is increasing by the CPI every year. I mean, last year, what do we have, 389,000 as excess host community fee? So if we were to, instead of parking that money in the capital stabilization fund, figure out how to get it, put it as part of the host community fee so we could do it right directly into capital without having to go through that thing and making it worse. This is why the numbers, I have to do the numbers.
Actually, can we go back, because Erica was very close, we are like right in the middle. So, the non-exempt debt service, if you look in your budget book in the slides, there is a slide for non-exempt debt service, and it shows the 5% line.
Yeah.
And it shows the 3% line. And the 5% of general fund operating budget is at 3.54 million. And right now, we're at 2.81 million. So getting up to 5% targeted, I mean, getting up to 5% is a huge amount of money. Let alone setting aside 2% more.
So are these the numbers that DOR is recommending, the 5%, 2%? Is this what's in their slide deck? Or is it
They
just?
didn't give a percentage today, because they don't do that. But these are pretty standard if you look at other financial policies.
Yeah,
I don't know that there's one right answer. I think I'd have to go back and look, S&P a few years back, and this is when we started to kind of like focus on paying down the debt. They were dinging us because of our elevated debt levels, but I think we're below that now. So we've just got to try to find $1 million in the right, spot for us. I think once we lay it all out too, MJ's right. It'll be better once we lay all these figures out and kind of take a look and see what the plan is.
right, like how it all. The other thing that's interesting about these policies is we've been very stringent in our financial policies on the use of free cash, and you can't use, and there were reasons for this, because we needed to hold the reins on using free cash. And so we have let some of that go in this policy and said, we're just gonna maintain our standards. We're gonna keep our reserves. It sets a policy for the general fund, free cash reserve and the stabilization reserve, which is, I think, gonna mean that we have to shift some money from free cash into stabilization to meet this policy. But that's okay, because you can invest your stabilization in better than you can your free cash. The other thing that we learned was that the capital stabilization fund isn't really count towards your bond rating because it's restricted. And I think we need to rethink about how we use that fund and whether what we've been doing for capital stabilization, where we've been doing the excess host community fee, whether we should continue to do it that way or whether we should do it a different way. And I do realize that with ISOM, having too much pressure on the host community fee can be difficult because it puts a pressure on them, but it's not the same as it was. Like before we had the long-term ash contract, the ISOM was a commodity. I mean, it was every day, like Dan getting on the phone, you're going to bring me some trash today? And
Right.
And so there was a lot more volatility than there is now with the long-term contracts. We have the Falmouth contract, we have the ash contract. We have so unless something untoward happens, like we're in pretty good, stabilization thing.
Very steady.
Yeah.
My concern is just with the rain, with the lot of rain we had and the leachate, hopefully the landfill's able to handle all of that, so we're not,
We have a barge contract in place now. We're moving it by barge.
okay.
Yeah. Do they do
As well
track?
as truck. I mean, we're still gonna.
Yeah.
But,
The barge is not a train, it's a barge.
barge.
It's working really well. There's a lot in here, and
Yeah.
they're very thorough. We had a lot of discussion on them. I think they came out really well. The one thing I noticed, because we actually never really got a chance to talk about the ISOM policy in that group. We never talked about it. I did notice that we put the future stabilization as a special purpose fund, and it's also in the ISWIM fund. It's also in the ISWIM policy, but I'm pretty sure we determined that that's not an ISWIM policy. So
Right.
when we actually put it into the other, we should take it out of the ISWIM portion of it.
Yeah, it's
Future
under
solid
E, under
waste
the
stabiliz-
special purpose stabilization.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
in the ISWIM as well.
Yeah, page 3D, is that where you're looking, MJ? Of the ISWIM policy?
Yeah, it is a D, I don't.
Future solid waste stabilization.
Yeah, it should not, right.
Yeah, it shouldn't,
We should
because it
strike
was.
it from
yeah,
there.
It's not, that's not a ISWIM thing anymore. And then we should actually have a discussion as a select board of whether we want to keep this policy as keep this stabilization fund as a special purpose stabilization fund, or whether we want to fold it into our major stabilization fund, so those funds become unrestricted stabilization. This kind of went into the future solid waste stabilization, went in when we were approaching the end, before the site assignment, the new site assignment, when we didn't know how
we were
long
at
the
the end
of-
landfill was gonna. It
When we were
could've
at
been
the end of what
closing
we
like
had,
next
yeah,
year.
yeah.
And so
Right.
they were like,
That
all
makes
right, well,
sense.
let's set some money aside for like paying for trash, and, yeah, so, I think that's a discussion that we should have. I think we should talk about the host community fee, and if I'm thinking that the host community fee at 600,000 is a little low. If we started using the CPI escalator that's coming in place for that this year, so it would, there would still be a cushion, but we got more towards the operating budget, and we could say that's gonna help us meet our capital because now it's going to capital stabilization anyway, so. And I don't know when we originally set the 600,000, what the host community fee was. I don't know when we did that, because I think it was like it might have been around $3 a ton. And so that was like, that was basically meeting I don't know, I just like to look at some numbers on that. Like, how can we tie that so it's not a stable number that allows it to escalate in accordance with the escalation of the actual per ton host community fee?
So, for budgeting purposes, I mean, obviously for budgeting purposes, we like having that be a steady number. Because God forbid that we overestimate.
Right, but if say we do 200,000 tons, right? And this year it's like $4.35, and recognize that C&D doesn't count towards that. We get host community fee for C&D, but it doesn't count towards the 220 because we transfer it out. So we get money for it, but it doesn't limit our 220. So we actually end up, I think, being able to do 200,000 tons plus C&D. If this year we're doing it at 200,000 at $3 a ton, and we're actually getting $4.35 a ton, that's a lot of money. And so if we took the base, and I don't think we got what it was last year. It was, I don't think he gave us that. He gave us the new number. I don't think we got the old number. I understand, but so we are budgeting now 900,000 for host community fee in the ISWIM budget, but we're only budgeting 600,000 for host community fee in the town side as a revenue to the town.
As a revenue.
Right.
The revenue side is, the budget number for the revenue side is where I'm concerned.
Right. All that I would want to do every year is to say we're budgeting it at 200,000 tons, and we're gonna, if the CPI went up 0.3% or 2%, we're just gonna increase it because we know that that's the increase we're getting in the per ton.
So you're just saying that if it goes up per ton, you want it to go up for the host fee,
Yeah, whatever that percentage increase is,
rather than a,
rather than a flat,
600,000.
because I don't see any reason to have it go to capital stabilization when our capital stabilization
doesn't count for.
doesn't count for what we're trying to do. I mean, it should count for what we're trying to do, because we're taking that money and then putting into that source. So I don't think
it is a
using
way to
capital
try to reach that number.
stabilization for capital expenditure should count against us in terms of, it shouldn't be a negative effect of what this is asking us to do. We're just doing it very conservatively, a year behind. We're not gonna do anything about it tonight.
No, but it
I-
could
but-
be,
but
it's something to
I'm
think about.
I'm interested in it, because we have to look at our revenues, and if we're losing revenue on the state side, we should, but we're getting it.
But what about, so, I'm not trying to be argumentative.
No,
But
no, you're concerned, and I
am
understand the
concerned.
concern.
I am concerned because we also, I mean, what if ISWIM's, because we also can't perfectly predict ISWIM's expenses. So what if they have a high expense year and they need it?
They don't get it. That's coming to us anyway. That money is reserved. The host community fee goes to the town. It's budgeted to go to the town. Whether it comes as part of the revenue at the beginning of the budget, or whether it comes
So-
as
So we would,
excess revenue, it comes to the town.
so we would never, exceed the 900,000.
Right.
No.
We would know, okay, so the 900,000 is still in place.
Right, and we still want a cushion below the 900,000, right? We don't want to make it the 900,000.
Yeah.
We want to have a cushion, but we need to get closer to the 900,000.
You're just trying to
It's-
shorten that
Yeah,
gap.
it's too much of a cushion right now.
Just trying to shorten that gap and take some of it and move it to where we need it.
Right. Because it's gotta be, I bet the host community fee's up $1.50 since we set that in. Because that would make it like 300,000 of excess. You know, somewhere in there. So I just think there's
Yeah.
room there, so, I don't know, trying to find that $1 million.
And it doesn't happen often, okay, but we also want to take into account too that it is possible that CPI decreases. So I think it's only happened once in the last 10 years, but.
But if that happened,
Expired.
then we'd decrease the host community fee that
Right.
year. We'd,
Right.
we'd adjust it, it would be a factor of what's happening with CPI and
Right.
what's happening, whatever the CPI they use for just establishing the host community fee, which they do for January, so we have it when we're doing the budget. It's just, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not gonna be part of this policy, it's just gonna be a procedure or something that we think about, because we don't have procedures for state revenue either. The other thing that happened in this, was including anything that the town departments or committees wanna use for, CPA funds for. It has to be part of the capital planning process, and that was implemented this year, so that they're not off doing their own thing with capital outlay, and the town administrator doesn't know about it. Everybody's together, it's all part of the plan. They should be putting their plans in the capital plan and saying, we're gonna use CPA funding, so that we know that those projects are coming up, so the town administrator can manage capital projects and plan for all the projects that are gonna have to go through procurement and oversight and everything in the next year, so. I don't know if there's anything else, really, I don't know, I mean, it was just, there's a lot in here. And as I mentioned before about the sewer, I just feel the sewer commissioners need to have a little bit more discussion, because I'd like more direction from this policy on the retained earnings and how much we can use and how we do that, but, I mean, maybe that just becomes a sewer commissioner policy, not part of the financial policy,
I think that probably makes sense.
to do it as a sewer
Fall directly under
policy.
the sewer.
I think it makes sense to do it as a sewer commissioner policy, because really it's really gonna depend on what is showing on your capital plan. Like, your capital plan in many ways should be kind of, and we're still in the process of building you a realistic capital plan, but if you start seeing like big things in the out years, that's where you need to think about how to manage your retained earnings, so you don't have like a really big year where you have a lot loading in.
Right.
And you also don't, you don't want to necessarily have your rates going up and
Yeah,
down and up and down
We want
and up.
big
You want to have
fluctuation in
a
rates.
steady, you want to have a steady,
Slow, steady, gradual increase.
yeah, steady, gradual increase. You don't want to have it be kind of a pinball.
So there are some policies that some towns or districts or enterprise funds where they talk about the working capital, the capital plan, and how to figure out like what your retained earnings should be. And that's, we can do it as an exercise for that, so.
Because I think I know we're still just trying to get our arms around what you need capital-wise.
Yeah. And then figuring out what we're.
And a lot of structure over the years yet.
And I mean,
Coming. We're
it
getting
is,
there.
it's a process. It's just, I would be, if we I feel that if we made a policy for retained earnings right now, we would just be making it up.
Yeah,
Yeah, we don't have any.
I have patience. I've been waiting almost 3 years.
Just to
I
make
can
it
write a
up.
few more. probably 4 before I even got on the board. All right, so process now. So what do we want to do? So we have these draft policies. I don't know if anybody has any concerns or questions or anything about them. I think they're pretty good. I think it's going to take a while to get used to them. I would like to see some of the numbers and how it would work. Do we want to have some sort of a joint meeting where we talk about these, or do we want to just approve them and let the different committees know that these are our new financial policies, and what do you want to do?
I actually have a question about that.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to stumble into like a charter violation or anything, but I'm not, so, I mean, you as the select board do set policies. I'm not sure that you can
Distribute?
give that to the finance committee. I just don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm
you
not sure
could-
we can either, but,
No.
so a lot of times they talk about making sure that those other entities, Upper Cape, Bourne Public Schools, the Finance Committee, they know what our policy is. So how do we communicate to
That's
them
what
and
I'm,
get
yeah, I think
them?
it's an education
We can
piece of
definitely
it.
share it.
Yeah.
We can definitely share it, but
Having
But
an actual meeting.
do they have a vote, I guess? Do they have
No,
a
I think
vote?
This
that's,
is not about
yeah,
a
I don't
vote, this
think
is
it's a
just
vote. I think it's an education piece of it.
And if you have any questions, it'll be a clearinghouse to answer any questions. And it shows transparency. We're not trying to make any decisions.
And maybe we
Do
go
you
to
do
them
that
instead of
before
having
you
to
vote or after you vote?
After, I think. I think as a board, we set policy, so we set it, and then we make sure that everybody understands that this is the policy.
So, this is, maybe we can take a point from our policy process, which I believe says that we take a draft policy like this, right?
Actually, let me pull it up really quick.
Okay.
But if part of this policy triggers a change in bylaw,
Capital, yes. Which will go to town meeting.
Right.
right,
So I think
So
you were making this
can we-
effective for July 1st. Basically,
Yeah,
we're building the budget on the old policy.
It wouldn't be
yeah.
effective.
yeah, but is it
wouldn't be effective
contingent, can
immediately.
we, I mean, because the town has to vote on the bylaw. What if it's a no?
Well, then we can figure that out then.
Yeah.
We can adjust this policy based, if they say no, they want to keep it at 10,000, we'll just go back into the policy and say, leave it at 10,000. They're not too much, I mean, that's about the
This
only
isn't
thing.
like,
don't think-
we're not setting this and implementing it immediate.
Right,
But anyway, what I started to
Well-
say is if we have this draft policy, if we put it out, like someone said, put it out on the website, so, I don't know, I think that's a different
be
policy.
there.
But if we put it out as our draft policy, if we send it to the school committee, we send it to the Upper Cape Tech, we send it to the finance committee, and the capital outlay committee, and we say these are our draft policies, and we're letting you read them. If you have any comments or concerns.
Yeah, we do
get
that
back
as
to
part
us.
of the reading.
Yeah.
Right, well, so this is, yeah, so, I mean, we didn't really call this first reading, but, we could sort of implement that process, and so that we take a couple meetings where it's a first reading or a second reading, and we send it out to different people. I mean, I don't
But
know.
remember, that's a voluntary educational
well,
Right.
school,
point.
school
But
committee was involved in the process,
Yeah.
Yes,
and FinCom, did FinCom have representation?
Oh, yeah.
They had
yeah,
representation,
Tom
right, in
and
that
Tom
process?
Joyce
So-
and Renee, and, yeah,
Oh, that's right, yeah.
so they were involved in the process.
They were involved in the process, so they've see this, they've seen all the edits, I mean, they've been part of the email chain.
But what I'm saying is like, you can send it out to everybody with a draft format as part of the readings, and that's all well and good, but as a policy setting board, we set that policy, and then if you want to put it out educationally thereafter, then it's then this is the policy, not a draft anymore. This is the policy. This is what we're using, and make sure everybody has an opportunity to understand and read it. That's different than doing the draft part. I mean, once you set the policy as a board,
Right.
then it's set.
Right.
And
Yeah,
then it
but-
becomes a real educational piece.
But our policy process says that,
Yes.
part of our policy process is that we send it out to stakeholders for comment after the
Yes.
first reading.
But that's part of the
Before.
process.
Or
Yeah.
before the first
Yeah,
reading? Okay,
so it says the board or subcommittee will develop a first draft of the language, which is what
Yeah.
this is. So this is the board's first draft. This will be distributed to all interested parties and stakeholder groups. The select board will hold a first reading on the draft and consider any feedback that was provided by interested parties. So
I think that's.
that's what we'll.
I think that's what we'll do. And can we include the ISWIM policy? Could you add the ISWIM policy into this? so that
Yes,
it's
we
part of
can,
it? Yeah?
yes, we can incorporate that
Right.
into it, yes.
And so that would be our draft. Mm-hmm. So, is everyone, I mean, the only thing I had was taking the future stabilization out of the ISWIM part of it. But so if we can maybe have a motion to accept this as a draft
So moved.
to send to stakeholders for comment?
Yes.
Second. Did someone second?
No, but you did. Yeah, just, as part of our process, this goes out to everyone as a draft. But then, I think if you're wanting that educational piece, I think you have to set your policy and then make sure everybody understands that it's the actual policy now, and this is, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
so now once we've adopted it, it's adopted.
Yeah, once it's adopted, it's adopted, then
Right.
that educational piece comes
But
in.
I think it's to make an offer, right? Like,
Yes.
you have, like, this is now the policy. Happy to come to your budget subcommittee meeting, if you have questions or you want us to clarify things or how this impacts, decision-making, et cetera. Highlight, yeah. Offer it. I think it's important to offer it.
Well, yeah, and that's part of the policy, that's part of setting it and going through the drafts, is it has
Right.
to go out as a draft to everyone
Right.
that's involved. But I think, once you set that policy, then that educational piece comes in.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Yeah.
important.
So we're gonna send it like to schools, school committees, both school committees, capital outlay, OPEB trustees, FinCom. Anybody else?
I'll go through and look.
Yeah, and see if there's anybody else,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll probably send it to Dan Barrett.
Yes,
I'll probably,
and the sewer commissioners.
I'll make sure you guys get it twice.
We need extra reading,
Should Board of
as if
Health-
this wasn't enough reading.
Board of Health doesn't really have anything to do with this.
They have a site assignment, authority,
No,
Nah,
doesn't have to do with financial policy, really.
nah.
the financial part of the ISWIM policy, I don't know.
They did review, they had to have the ISOM policy as part of the site assignment, but they don't,
They don't set it.
No.
I mean, we could send it to them.
It's just a courtesy,
So they're aware of the ISWIM as part of this policy. I guess we
Yeah.
could do that. Okay, so we have a motion and second
Second.
to accept it for his draft to send the stakeholders for comment. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions? It's unanimous. Okay, moving right along. MMA debrief DEI objectives. So, I don't know, this is just a like open discussion. This is really a kind of a workshop-y kind of, policy workshop-y kind of meeting. Anybody have any thoughts or comments about what they talked about at, the MMA conference? Any thoughts about direction one of the things that I thought was really interesting was, the guy who said, when you're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, if you don't have data, you only have opinion. I thought that was really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And how to get the data is, what data do we have? What data do we need? What kind are we looking for? I actually talked to Joan Linsky today to tell her that we were having this discussion, and she's been talking with Wandra,
Yeah.
and they're looking at some different groups to try to start attempting to get data from. So, and I don't know,
Yeah, I
do we
think-
have diversity questions on any of our procurement? That was one of the things that came up at MMA.
On our procurement?
Yeah,
Or-
like for vendors, do we ask them any of those questions? And he said, you know what, that's just adding a checkbox to see where you're coming from, because he said, sometimes people are just buying things from the same people, and if they find out that don't have a diverse group of vendors, that they could, try to reach out then and change their vendor processes, I think we do have to keep track of diversity in terms of employment. I think that's something that we're already tracking. They said
Yep.
that there is that data.
Yeah.
But that piece about the procurement was interesting, to just ask your vendors, like, to kind of put that little checkbox in your thing so that you can gather that data and know,
Yeah, I think the data, data-driven decision-making, right? And how to move forward with some of the program that we hope to have to be that DEI community, where everybody's feels that they have a place here, regardless of who they are. And I think data is an important piece of that. I mean, there's tons of programming, we can do activities, right? But if we want to become a community that is identified as saying, that Bourne community, man, oh man, they do it right? And everybody has a place here.
One of the, I'm gonna go through some of my notes. What are the barriers to attending town meeting? Like we hear, if you watch Facebook, I can't come because it's this, I think it's almost impossible to get everyone, but that was an interesting. Medway did some sort of a community survey, and they ended up developing a welcome packet that was, there's Metropole Planning Technical Assistance Grants going on that you can get help with this. Public hearing and newspaper reform to a digital advocate. Oh, yeah, so that was one of the things they talked about changing, like the old-fashioned public hearing things in the newspaper is so antiquated. Like, trying to find a better way to do that is a better way to get diversity in your vendor, in your things.
Yeah, that needs to change for so many reasons.
Yeah, and that's a state, that's like a state rule or
Yeah, it's the
something.
law, it's a law in the statute for a lot of public hearings.
Everyone should have the opportunity to achieve their best potential. So it was a good seminar. I kind of,
It was different, depending on which one you went to,
yes.
Because based on the feedback in the first one, the one that you guys went after, they changed the discussion point, so I know they taped all of them, so I want to go back and watch them on, through Mass Municipal's YouTube page and see what the difference is, and
Do they film them, or just, I don't know if they taped
Do
it.
they film them, or they just do the slides?
I think they just,
Posted slides?
I did see a camera, in the first session when I was in, I saw a camera in the back.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
oh,
I don't know.
But that could have been one of the board members sitting there in the
Right.
audience doing it themselves.
Yeah.
anybody else have any thoughts?
The fact that it's on the agenda is a good thing. It shows that we, that we are aware of this, and it's something that we should be following up and doing more of.
I think it involves a lot of, events and being present as well. We have the Race Amity every year. That should be, we should promote that and attend that, and be there and be present at those kind of events. So I think it's a lot of that as well. It's, getting the community together in events that talk about DEI and make people feel welcome at events that are just targeted about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that's a good start as well. It's not always a comfortable conversation either. You know, we have to learn to be uncomfortable. We all have to look at our own implicit bias as well. So that sometimes helps, right? When we can really look at ourselves and.
I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. It's been, people have kept it in the background, been quiet about it, but, I mean, the things have changing, and I think we need to have a policy or committee or both in place where people feel comfortable of where they can go if they feel they're not being, if they're not being respected or included. It's, what was eye-opening was the whole Carrie McRae experience. And when the school committee had the meeting that night, there were so many people there that wanted to be heard. And, I just think that we need to not forget that, and we need to try to, create, some awareness that, this is not just a one-off, that we're going to work on this going forward. Because everybody is a part of this community, and everybody should be heard, whatever they're, whoever they are, and wherever it is. I know I'm rambling, but I think the times are changing, and we got to change with them.
Small things, like I was approached by Beth Griffin from the Bourne Substance Abuse Coalition, and she wants to try to implement through her Rotary Club, and they'd be willing to pay for it and everything. I have that information. I want to talk to the Human Rights Commission, see if it could be a Barnstable County thing, but it might be something that we talk about as a select board, doing a peace. She's talked about just as something as simple as a peace poll, and getting people together around something like that, peace itself, and make it a DEI event. I don't know how it looks, but that's just one example of, community people who are wanting to see more unity and more events. So we just met a week and a half ago, so I have the stuff and we're going to talk about it. But I mean, that's just one example of things we could do to promote DEI, I guess.
Well, the fact that we're discussing it now, it shows that we're taking it seriously. Not that we didn't before, but now it's out there, so it's a start.
It'd be interesting to see how we could maybe get community engagement committee, involved. They don't really sponsor events, but, people could go to the community engagement committee with plans for a DEI event. And so anyway, I do know that Wandra and Mrs. Linsky and I think Melissa was going to meet with them too. So I think there's people in the community that are kind of getting engaged. And so I'm interested in hearing from them too, in terms of how they're doing. A commission is more the direction I think that you would go in rather than a committee. It's kind of like the Disability Commission, ADA Commission. They deal with disability things, but I'm not sure what I want them to do yet, so it's hard to set up a committee that I'm not sure exactly what what they would be doing. Even though I read the Acton Commission and how they had so maybe we could look at a couple of the communities that have things, and I know that MMA is doing some work on this area, so if we start looking at their resources too.
And the schools too.
I think it's important too that we're cognizant of the fact that we have to be careful as well, not to always look to the person of color or the person who's Jewish or something to do this work either. A lot of people tend to, and we call it tokenism in Native American communities, where people say, oh, well, let's look at the Indian in the room and they're going to have all the answers for me. It's not the people of color and the people the LGBTQ people who should be telling us how to do the work. We need to do it ourselves. So that's something we need to be very careful. We don't want to be looking to just people of color and people who are part of that to do this work.
Right.
We have to do it.
No, I totally agree. And the other person that was interested in it was someone from the Historic Society who said, that they're a diverse group and that they could get involved in sort of this that bringing this community together, and they aren't, and of any kind of, I have been approached by other people
Yeah.
that have been interested in the whole concept.
Of course,
and-
people of color want to participate and share and have views on it, but it's always best to avoid the tokenism, as we say.
Yes.
And not, people always look at me in the room, and I'm like, what are you looking at me for? It's happened on several occasions, when we're talking about these things. So, just to make sure I put that out there.
So, I wanted to have this on the agenda, we'll do it again, and, if anybody has any thoughts, any ideas as we go forward, just let me know if you'd like it on the agenda, and we'll just keep on keeping on.
Sure.
All right, then, are we good with that? I guess we don't have minutes.
No?
Committee reports, any committee reports?
I called, since Anne Marie and I are on the advisory committee for the Bridge to Cape Cod Canal discussion, and I was afraid that we possibly miss a meeting, because they were supposed to go every 3 months, but with no new update or information at this point, they wanted to wait until the spring and see if anything more comes out, with the grants, and so stay tuned. So.
Okay, that's good. I did talk to Marlene about legislative, asking the legislators in, and we're planning on doing that late in April, so we get through the preparation for town meeting and stuff, so, but we'll put that together too.
I got one, just the Joint Base Cape Cod. The meetings, we're doing it's budget review time for us, so there's not a ton for me to report back, but they did have the Civilian Commission sponsored an awards dinner
Oh, yeah.
that had been canceled previously, and Rep Vieira really and some others really stepped it up, and they made sure the event was not canceled. And it was really great. They had a low attendance threshold, almost not enough to have the event, and it ended up being like 93 people that went. My husband and I went, and some other folks. It was really nice, and I was really glad that they were able to pull it together in like 4 days or 5 days or something.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
So it was really great. So I just wanted to make sure
My brother's on that, and he actually called me for some press to, be able to go, and
Yeah, it was really nice to be there. I was glad I went. It was Sunday night late, and I wasn't sure if I was going to make it, and something told me to get in the car and make it, and I was really happy I did. It was really nice to watch them get their awards. So.
And then BCC they'll do, Community Engagement Committee, BCC, Bourne Community Voting. Community Engagement Committees, we'll have our first meeting of the year next week. And then, of course, there's still a vacancy on the CTAC, so I think part of their little media outreach, they put it in as well, so.
is community engagement working on their criteria?
Yes,
And could they come and talk to us about criteria? Because I really think it's important that they expand to not have it only nonprofits, as opposed to individuals or groups who are doing something not-for-profit.
and we've had that discussion, yes,
Okay.
changing that language. I have to follow up with the legal counsel, I haven't heard back on some of the language change I had requested.
Okay. That's, because I think that's important, because we want to,
That
things
was
like
it,
Bourne.
instead of nonprofit,
Things like
you have
the
not-for-profit.
Bourne for the 4th of July parade should be able to get community engagement funding. The fire department, if they set up a volunteer group,
Right.
that should
For
be
their
able to
100th
get community
anniversary.
engagement funding if they
Library.
want to, yeah.
Library do anything for their 100th?
Not that I'm aware of
Okay.
yet.
Correspondence.
Select Board correspondence for February 6, 2024. A, Department of Environmental Protection letter, final community involvement plan comments. B, Department of Environmental Protection letter, non-DOD property, Old Grenade Courts. C, Department of Environmental Protection letter, demolition area 1 environmental monitoring report. D, Department of Environmental Protection letter, J1 Range Southern Environmental Monitoring Report. E, Barnstable County Responsible Management Entity newsletter for the winter. F, Cape Cod Commission Transportation Improvement Plan. G, a memo from the Recreation Area feasibility study CPC application narrative, and H, a memo for the skate park and softball field redesign application narrative.
Future agenda items.
Not this.
I have, Marlene and I have been working on a kind of a draft, meeting schedule, and I think I'll get it out to the committee, just so you kind of know how we're scheduling things out, and have an idea of like, you know, what we're thinking over the next couple of months, so you know what's on the.
And you have the
on the slate.
CTAC report for the 13th?
The 13th?
No, I think it's, I forget.
It's supposed to be the 13th.
I think it's.
That's what we were told.
Is it the 13th or the 20th? I think it might be the 13th.
Sorry. CTAC report, February 13th.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
for the 13th. Okay, next meeting dates, 13th and 20th, 27th for sewer commissioners, March 5th, no meeting, selection day.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion by Peter, is there a second? Second by Jared, any further
Oh.
discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions?
That was painful.
We did good.